On Fox Business Alert, Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke is changing a few things, saying the Fed will start issuing more economic forecasts than Alan Greenspan ever did. That might be an easy thing to do. And improve communication with Wall Street. That will definitely be an easy thing to do from where Alan Greenspan was. Adam Shapiro with all the details. Adam?
Good afternoon, David. This is a lot like that scene in The Wizard of Oz where the dog pulls the curtain aside and the guy says, "Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain." Ben Bernanke is pulling the curtain aside and saying, "Pay attention, folks. Look at what we're doing and understand the process by which we make decisions." Those decisions being how the Fed determines whether it's going to cut interest rates or raise interest rates. And what Mr. Bernanke is saying is they're now going to put out every quarter projections from the FOMC, the Federal Open Markets Committee, on the economy, whether they think it will grow or slow, on unemployment, and on inflation. Big key here is inflation. And they're going to raise those projections, instead of being for just 2 years, to 3 years. The bottom line on all this is to make it easier to understand.
The communication strategy of the Federal Reserve is a work in progress. I believe that the changes announced by the FOMC today are an important advance. The changes will provide a more timely insight into the committee's outlook, will help households and businesses better understand and anticipate how our policy decisions respond to incoming information, and will enhance our accountability for the decisions we take.
And Mr. Bernanke is hoping that by doing this, the Fed will offer some stability to the financial markets as people now look even further out as to what the FOMC, the 12 people who make up that committee, are actually thinking when they meet and decide whether or not they're going to be cutting rates. By the way, we're going to get the first of these expanded projections. We're going to get that next week, and we're going to see actually what they are thinking as far as what we can expect in the next 2 to 3 years for this economy. David?
All right, so that'll solve all economic problems. It's
all
that
of
simple.
them, right away.
I wouldn't say that.
So are the changes announced by Bernanke a good idea?
Jim Pettakakis of U.S. News and World Report, along with Peter Schiff, author of Crash Proof, join us now to discuss it. Jim, I'll start with you. These efforts to kind of make things more transparent, is that a good thing? Do you think it'll work?
I think it is a good thing. I mean, I think we can all remember when Alan Greenspan was head of the Fed, and he'd go before Congress, and he'd be up there, for a couple hours giving testimony, and then at the end of the couple hours, you didn't know what the heck he just said. He had to be like one of those criminologists or something, kind of tearing through his testimony to figure out what he thought about the economy. And what the Fed does is important. As Chairman Bernanke said, people make decisions based on what they think the Fed's going to do. Wall Street makes decisions based on what the Fed's going to do. So if they have a better idea what the Fed is going to do, then that might end up creating more rational decision-making by both businesses and investors. So I do think it's a good thing.
And, Peter, I shouldn't be too flippant about it, because it's true that the Fed does have a lot of information, more information than we have, on which it bases its decisions.
Well, I'm sure that they do, but if you look at their economic forecasts that they've made in the past, they have a pretty bad track record.
Understood, but wouldn't you like to have access to more information? It never hurts, right?
Well, I think we get more disinformation coming out of the government and the Fed. I just like to get my information in the markets. I like to see what's actually happening, not what the government tries to convince me is happening.
But don't you think, Peter, that go ahead, Jim. Go ahead.
But since the Fed is going to act on what their forecasts are, what their models are saying, and their decisions will influence, interest rates, the economy going forward. I mean, I would like to know what they're going to do so I can plan in advance. So you can look at other things too, like Peter does. I mean, Peter looks at gold. He probably looks at, Treasury bond yield, all kinds of things. But one element of all that is what the Fed does. I would like to know.
Peter, wouldn't you rather have more information than less, whether you discount it?
I get plenty of information. I'd rather have the government be honest and more straightforward. I think one of the reasons Alan Greenspan used to be so subtle is because I don't think he wanted anybody to know what he really believed. I think he wanted to talk in secret. So
I don't think so. I think Alan Greenspan didn't want to affect the markets. Whether that works for all of us, I'm not exactly sure. But
I don't think he wanted to let on. I think Alan Greenspan and I have a lot more in common as far as what we believe in economically than people think. And I think Alan Greenspan realized the problems that we were in, and he didn't want to telegraph that.
Jim, you agree?
I'm not sure what problems he's referring to. Since I mean, during the Alan Greenspan era at the Fed, I mean, the economy overall did pretty good.
Let's just go back to Peter for a second. Peter, give us a for instance. For instance, what was he lying about?
Well, look at the book that he wrote. I mean, Alan Greenspan knew that he was facilitating a credit bubble. He knew that we had a growing current account deficit and a trade deficit that ultimately were going to be a big problem. He knew that we had a lack of domestic savings.
So he wants the United States to fail. That's your point.
No, he doesn't want it to fail.
So why would he come out with these lies if he knew that he was keeping terrible information from the American people?
Because what they're trying to do is, for political reasons, you know, we were able to pretend that everything was okay. We had this artificial economy based on spending borrowed money. And for a while, everybody on Wall Street was making money and consumers were spending money and politicians were getting reelected. And he just didn't want to, you know, rain on that parade.
You know, one of the other things, Jim, one of the other things that Ben Bernanke discussed today was that he is considering looking more at the headline consumer price index number, which gives us an indication of inflation at the consumer level, versus the so-called core rate, which eliminates the so-called often volatile food and energy prices. But of course, we all eat food and we all use gasoline.
That's right.
What do you think about that?
Right. Well, I mean, the Fed does have a mandate to pay attention to inflation, and for the average person, who does drive a car, who goes to the store, when those prices go up, it affects you. Now, as far as whether the Fed acts or not, I think what the Fed's still going to really pay attention to is that core rate, which excludes those things which tend to be very volatile and they can shift a lot from month to month, because the Fed doesn't want to get whipsawed. It wants to look at data which it thinks has some stability to it. But it does. But the Fed wants to act at least like it's in touch with the concerns of average Americans who, as you said, are affected by those top line numbers.
Okay.